Hello, this is Loxton, and you are about to watch an incredible documentary on the development and history of the Fallout franchise. But first, there is something important I think you should know, and this is that this documentary, and many more like it, are written and produced by my friend Chris, and he posts even more over on his channel, Chronicles. So please be sure to go and check out his channel for more documentary-style videos on Pokemon, Tales, Fire Emblem, and many more to come. And many of these feature myself, as well as other YouTubers doing the narration. So either now or after watching this video, please be sure to check out and subscribe to Chronicles right here. Now then, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this presentation. Post-apocalyptia, a genre that can have many meanings and many different variations. From the crazed and colorful world of the Borderlands series to the derelict sect of humanity in The Last of Us, the video game industry has many different forms of it, but none have proven to be more unique and intriguing than the Fallout series. Taking the drab post-apocalyptic genre and giving it a 1950s attitude, there was nothing quite like it, leading the way forward in strategy role-playing, gameplay, and storytelling. The franchise seems to dominate this genre even to this day. But how did it all start out? Where did the ideas and inspirations for this series sprout? Well, it all started with one man and an unfamiliar wasteland.
Shine, little glowworm, glimmer, glimmer. Shine, little glowworm, glimmer, glimmer. Lead us light.
In the late 1980s, Interplay was a brand new entrant into the publishing and developing space. Their critically and commercially acclaimed The Bard's Tale series had launched them into the stratosphere of the then emerging PC gaming community. But what would define them would not be this fantasy epic, but would be something much more dark. In 1988, the team would release the game Wasteland, a post-apocalyptic RPG that was revolutionary for its time, introducing one of the very first persistent worlds in gaming. Taking place in a derelict 2087, after the collapse of society following a global nuclear war, players were charged with being a member of the Desert Rangers, a remnant of the army in the southwestern United States, and they had to investigate a series of disturbances in nearby areas. While video games of the era took a mostly light and fluffy approach to storytelling, Wasteland went down the darker route. Choices were no longer simply black and white, and were evidently various shades of gray. You could make a choice that haunts you forever, and you'll never be able to change it back. As for Wasteland's visuals, like most games of its time, the graphics were simple at best, but that's all they needed to be. The story and the way you play was paramount. Wasteland's mechanics, on the other hand, were based directly on those used in the tabletop role-playing games Tunnels and Trolls and Mercenaries, Spies and Private Eyes, which were created by Wasteland designers Ken Andre and Michael Stackpole. Characters in Wasteland consequently have various stats such as strength, intelligence, and luck, among others, that allow them to use different skills and weapons. Experience is gained through battle and through the use of skills. The game would generally let players advance through a variety of means. There were many ways to play Wasteland, not just one. These ideas introduced here would rattle the gaming industry for years to come, and since Wasteland was financially successful, a sequel, of course, was on its way. Releasing in 1990, Fountain of Dreams was branded as the technical sequel to Wasteland, but was nothing of the sort, as it was created internally by EA itself. Tim Kaine and the team at Interplay were not involved in any way, shape, or form. Fountain of Dreams was the beginning of a darker trend at EA, pushing away its subsidiary developers and creating mediocre sequels to their properties in-house. A smaller game, taking place in a post-nuclear Florida, Fountain of Dreams included what some of Wasteland had created, but to a very small degree. The press and fans alike instead preferred to reject its existence and hope for a true sequel to the masterpiece. But that would not come for quite some time. Unfortunately for Interplay, the rights to Wasteland stayed firmly in EA's grasp due to the fact that Interplay had recently released a 10th anniversary pack containing the game through EA. Seeing this, the team at Interplay, led by one Tim Kaine, decided to take a different approach. Taking their ideas and knowledge of the world they created, Tim Kaine led the charge on this effort. But where to start? First was the inspiration. The team at Interplay looked towards one of the most popular tabletop role-playing games, GURPS. The series seemed like a perfect fit for the team's vision, so they soon contacted Steve Jackson Games for the rights to the adaptation. Initially, there was a lot of skepticism coming from Steve Jackson as Interplay approached him with an offer. Interplay still had not decided what their first GURPS game would be about. Tim Kaine proposed the idea of huge fallout shelters, called vaults, that would protect the public from a nuclear war. In lieu of this, they gave their new creative endeavor the affectionately named title of Vault 13. A GURPS post-nuclear war adventure. Before they could start, however, Tim Kaine had already laid down the groundwork. Starting in 1994, he built the entire game's engine from scratch, a feat that seemed nigh impossible. With no money and no resources, Kaine was able to create it in 6 months, astonishing the collectives at Interplay. With the right man on the job, the company let him assemble a team of 30 people to create the game in the next 3 years. Over this time, the game was nearly cancelled outright after Interplay acquired licenses to new tabletop games, and Vault 13 was almost changed into a real-time MMORPG, like the classic Ultima Online. But Kaine was steadfast in his conviction toward the product, and was successful in keeping his vision alive. But where did it start? First, they laid down a few simple rules. Rule number 1, multiple decisions. We will always allow for multiple solutions to any obstacle. Rule number 2, no useless skills. The skills we allow you to take will have meaning in the game. Rule number 3, dark humor is good. Slapstick is not. Rule number 4, let the player play how he wants to play. Rule number 5, your actions have repercussions. These 5 rules laid down the groundwork for the entire game. It was supposed to be no holds barred. Anything, no matter how dark, would be allowed. Even the killing of children. This was early in 1995, and even saying the word ass was illegal from public broadcasting. Interplay wanted to push the limits of the gaming genre and the populace itself to its absolute and outer limits. Because of these changes, the title was appropriately changed into Fallout, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure, as a means to reflect the darker storytelling. But someone, of course, was bound to disagree with their way of thinking. In early 1997, in the midst of Fallout's development, Steve Jackson Games and Interplay suddenly terminated their deal. Apparently, Steve Jackson Games was satisfied with everything except for the iconic Vault Boy pictures in the character screen, and the execution scene in the introduction was too much for them to handle. As the split between Fallout and GURPS became imminent, Steve Jackson remarked, "The GURPS implementation they've created is worth saving." Taking this to heart, and at the last minute too, the title was changed to Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, and the GURPS system was replaced with the newly designed Special Character System. But upon release, Fallout was just as revolutionary as its predecessor, Wasteland, taking place 84 years later, in 2161, after nuclear war between China and the United States decimated the human race. Fallout tasks you as a vault dweller from Vault 13 to find a new water chip out in the derelict wasteland. Giving you the now iconic Pip-Boy 2000 and some meager equipment, the player is thrust into the remains of Southern California to find their salvation. Along the way, you encounter raiders, mutant monstrosities, and government conspiracies from a time gone by. All the while, the game has an unsettlingly cheery 1950s backdrop, with the cultural values of them seeming to clash with the ones of today. The ideology of the 50s and things like the nuclear family and the threat of communism permeate the series, creating a sort of uniqueness to it. More interestingly though, the game was also one of the first to include a character creation system, an innovative idea for the time. This is where the old GURPS system came into play. Where GURPS was supposed to define the character's strengths and weaknesses, the special system picked it up instead. Defining the character's various stats, it allowed the player to create whomever they wanted. Unlike Wasteland's text-based and two-dimensional world, Fallout was played on a pseudo-isometric 2.5-dimensional plane. Exploration exploration was key here. Even though there was the timed mission of getting the water chip back within 400 days, players were still encouraged to wander off the beaten path and interact with the local inhabitants. Just like in real life, the people have their own inherent problems, which the player may choose to solve, in order to acquire karma and experience points. Where Fallout deviates from most role-playing video games is that it often allows for these problems to be tackled in various ways, often choosing solutions that are unconventional or even contrary to the original task at hand. These actions may prove to be minor ones, but some may change the game world forever. But, just like in Wasteland, players had to fend off mutants and their fellow man alike. Instead of a text-based combat system, Interplay went with a strategy role-playing game approach. As it is turn-based, combat uses an action point system, wherein, each turn, multiple actions may be performed, until all points in the pool have been expended. Different actions consume different numbers of points, so players would have to choose their targets wisely. While this would have made for an ordinary tactical RPG, what really spiced it up were the perks. Perks were special elements of the level up system. Every 3 levels, a perk is granted of the player's choosing. They can grant special effects such as letting the player have more actions per turn, or make them more smooth of a talker. The various stats came into play too, with your decision affecting whether you can run around beating people with a baseball bat or shooting them in the head with a pistol. With a unique setting all of its own and gameplay and exploration that separated itself from the crowd, Fallout was a sure win for Interplay. Releasing in 1997 to critical and commercial acclaim, Interplay's latest title became a smash hit. The hard work and dedication of the team and incredibly dedicated Tim Kaine had poured their hearts and souls into this project, and had now come out on top. Fallout had redefined what it meant to be in the post-apocalypse, with its zany characters and even wilder premise. And that is what fans had grown to love about the Fallout franchise. And of course, they wanted more. But could they hit gold once again? Or were there some hard times on the horizon? After Interplay released Fallout, things weren't all what they had seemed. While the game was the critical success they had hoped for, financially, they were rather in dire straits. And things only got worse from there. In 1998, Interplay had to file for bankruptcy due to their many failures as a company. If they continued as a private publisher, at this rate, they would most assuredly go under. Seeing this, Interplay turned public for the entire world to see. After this, sales of shares on the stock market went through the roof, bringing them back from a wasteland of their own making. To reflect their new status, they also changed their name to Interplay Entertainment Corporation, a byproduct of going public. Either way, with more money in hand, the company finally had the funds to continue their adventure in the future they created. But more internal strife was yet to come. Once Fallout came out, a small subset of Interplay developers broke away to form their own studio within the company to work exclusively on the franchise. Their name would be Black Isle Studios. Their goal would be to make a sequel that would appeal to all of their rabid fans' demands, while also creating something that would exceed the original. It would be bigger, better, and more badass. Players would be free to roam about the wasteland at their own leisure with no limit to their time at hand. Along with this, there would be even more areas to explore than there've ever been before. And living, breathing people with stories to tell would be populating every corner of it. The game would also be more over the top than ever before, with politics, sex, drugs, violence, basically all the stuff you'd expect to happen in a post-apocalyptic world. And it would all take place in a landscape saturated with pop culture references. On top of all this, instead of having the leisure 3 to 4 year development cycle that the first game had, Black Isle only had a year and a half to make it. These, among other things, tore apart the original developmental team to a nigh unrecognizable state. Tim Kaine, the creator and grand designer of the original Fallout, left the company behind for good due to creative differences, jumping ship to found Trokia Games. Tim Kaine, the creator of this new cult classic, would never have a hand in creating another Fallout game ever again. With much of the developmental team disappearing from the company, Fergus Urquhart, the founder of Black Isle, would take on the task of leading this new effort. But Fergus had to push his people to the breaking point to get the game to release on time. 100-hour work weeks, way above the healthy amount, were extremely common in this development phase. The team was also split into multiple segmented parts, with different people taking a different corner of the game world as their own. All the while, all of them had no idea what the other teams were doing with their own little pieces of the world. If done any less, the game could have turned out to be a disaster. But somewhere along the way, all of the pieces were able to fit into their own little masterpiece. Fallout 2, a post-nuclear role-playing game, would try to pick up the pieces of the first game where it left off. 80 years after the events of Fallout 1, the original Vault Dweller has founded a new town called Arroyo, after being forced to leave Vault 13 forever. Decades later, he's disappeared from the settlement entirely, leaving you, the Chosen One, as the direct descendant and only heir. With severe famine and droughts plaguing his hometown, the player must search for a Gek, or Garden of Eden creation kit, in order to save everyone he loves. Donning the classic Vault 13 jumpsuit and a Pip-Boy 2000, the Chosen One must begin his own journey into the wasteland, with all of the hardships his predecessor endured. While the story would maintain much of its tonal consistencies from the original, the planned changes also came into play for better or worse. Pop culture references to things such as Monty Python and Star Trek became common occurrences, along with multiple parodying dialogue choices that represent the series itself. At times, the game was even found to break the fourth wall entirely. Throughout it all, the game maintained its unique 1950s past. The Vault Boy and the various cartoons and cheery ideals that came with him were synonymous with the series, and seemingly added to this new setting that Black Isle had created. Fallout 2 also received several improvements in the gameplay department. Still keeping its traditional branching dialogue system, more options were added in to spice it up. Your party members or companions that had existed in the previous entry now were fully customizable with their own sets of attitudes to choose from. Players also were given the option to get a little rougher with NPCs, throwing them aside from doors if they're in the way. The world was expanded upon too, with new locations such as New Reno and the New California Republic being ever present. Even old locations such as Vault 13 were available to the player, although some would not be in the state they used to be in. Alongside this, combat was also shored up to a considerable degree, ironing out all the kinks from the previous system. The special system was still ever present, defining who your character would be and how they would react to the game world. Perks also made a return, with a wider variety of them being available to use for good and bad reasons. But still, choice was always paramount to the game's success. Just like in Fallout 1, it was up to you to decide the fate of the wasteland. Whether you became a law-abiding citizen or a rampaging murderer, or anything in between, was all up to you in the end. And that is what separated this franchise from the crowd. The ability to make your decisions and carve your own path was unheard of in much of the gaming industry at the time, and that is what kept their rabid fanbase intact for the sequel. Releasing just in time for its soul-crushing December 1998 deadline, it seemed all was well for just a second. They would regret that. While somehow the pieces had fit together to tell a coherent and well-thought-out story and world, Fallout 2 was littered with bugs on release. Due to a lack of beta and QA testers, and having put the finished product together 2 weeks before release, Black Isle had a considerable task at hand of putting their work back together. Worst yet, sales only improved ever so slightly. While their new hit franchise, Baldur's Gate, sold an amazing 1 million units, Fallout 2 only sold 100,000, a mere 20,000 more than its predecessor. Even in this dire situation, there was still some hope. Critics praised the game, even though some still said it was more of the same as the first Fallout, but that same was considerably strong as the fan base ate it up. Bugs and all, Black Isle had no idea what a sensation they were. To their small group of fans, they were gods among gaming. To themselves, they were just glad to be done with it all. But for a moment, these coders and designers were icons, even though all of this was just about to come crashing down on their heads. After Fallout 2's abysmal returns, things at Interplay would have to again be shaken up, for better or worse. The first to go would be the founder of Interplay itself, Brian Fargo. After enduring loss after loss due to his leadership, Interplay was forced to broker a deal with Paris-based game company Titus Software. Agreeing to invest millions of dollars in the company, Titus had saved Interplay from what would seem to be their deathbed. That is, if Interplay wouldn't undo this newfound funding on their own terms. While this debacle was going on, Interplay decided to shelve Fallout's famed developer, Black Isle Studios, in favor of a newer studio called Micro Forte. Having little experience in the gaming industry at the time, Interplay still threw one of their most famous properties onto this fledgling studio. But the game they would craft would be nothing like the predecessors before it. In fact, it would embrace the part of the series that sometimes fell to the wayside: Fallout Tactics: Brotherhood of Steel. Releasing in March of 2001, was nothing like the Fallouts before in any shape or form. Gone was the series' iconic humor and self-referential attitude, and in its place was a stereotypical strategy RPG. Still using the mechanics of the original gameplay systems put in place, it seemed like all would be the same. But Micro Forte wouldn't make that the case. Instead of California, it would take place in the Midwest, and instead of following a classic Vault Dweller, you would control a new Brotherhood of Steel initiate and the squad he was in. The world map and towns that replaced it were gone, leaving the colorful inhabitants of the past behind for good, and in their place were Brotherhood of Steel bunkers that only offered up some trading and gambling for players to enjoy. There would be less of a focus on the storytelling that had made the series memorable, and more of a focus on the combat. Players would receive missions from the bunkers and would shove out to a selected area with their team. Once players have chosen their teammates, they are ushered into a cornered-off section of the world and told to kill and loot everything in it. And here is where one of the most radical changes comes into play. While previous games had used a real-time strategy system, Tactics took a different approach, comprising of 3 modes: continuous turn-based, individual turn-based, and squad turn-based combat. Each would allow the player to customize the game to their playstyle. It was an all-new way to play Fallout, and it would divide much of the fandom. Some would even say that it doesn't even belong in the Fallout mythos. And while critics praised it just like the game before, it again flopped financially, despite secretly praying for its success. Many sequels to Fallout Tactics were actually in the works both before and after this game's release. The most obvious, of course, was Fallout Tactics 2. This sequel would take players to a Florida that had been overridden by a mutated Gek, that being the Garden of Eden creation kit, and rid the state of the infestation. In some ways, it could have been a throwback to Fountain of Dreams, and the property EA had taken from them, but poor sales of Tactics meant that this sequel would never see the light of day past the conceptual phase. In tandem with this, another project was in the works that would be developed for consoles instead of the series' beloved PC. Fallout Extreme would have been a very different game in its own right. Following the cause, the player would travel through the northwestern United States and even into China to do battle with the Brotherhood of Steel. It would be developed for the Xbox and PlayStation 2 by Interplay's 14 Degrees East division, and would be another attempt to rekindle the magic of the Fallout series. But Fallout Extreme would, unfortunately, never see past its own developmental phase. Before all this, one final, notable cancelled project was the Fallout game exclusive to the original PlayStation. It would be a top-down shooter developed by Interplay itself, but as with the rest who came after it, this effort was turned down once again. In the background of all this, Interplay had even tried to bring a Fallout film to the market with their new Interplay Films division. But alas, even after having the full screenplay treatment, the division's budget was entirely taken away, leaving yet another concept dead in the water. It seemed Interplay was running out of ideas, and losing ground fast. If something couldn't be done, then the company would perish. Seeing this, Titus Interactive decided to let go of Brian Fargo once and for all, and take over the company for good. Helming his own company for nearly 2 decades, Fargo had to finally abandon ship for his own efforts elsewhere. In his place, Titus would put Hervé Kahn, and his changes to the company would run deep and change its very foundation forever. Con extracted much of what had made the company great. Some of these unpopular decisions would involve the selling of Shiny Entertainment, creators of the classic Earthworm Jim series, along with Blue Sky Software, a company that had already been on the verge of collapse. But the straw that truly broke the camel's back was Black Isle. After years of critical acclaim with no financial revenue to back it up, Hervé Con truly felt that the dedicated team was not worth the trouble. On December 8th, 2003, Interplay would lay off the entire Black Isle Studios staff, leaving the studio a shell of its former self and leaving the Fallout franchise decimated creatively. But unbeknownst to the world at large, the team was on the verge of a huge success, a sequel that was nearly completed to fruition. Codenamed Van Buren, Fallout 3 was gone, despite being even more grandiose than Black Isle's previous entries. Disconnected from the original storyline of Fallouts 1 and 2, it would incorporate multiple factions vying for power, including an even more powerful New California Republic and the militaristic Caesar's Legion, and involve you as a prisoner in between them and a rogue scientist trying to nuke the world all over again. The gameplay would involve a unique dual combat system, allowing players to choose between either real-time or turn-based combat on the fly. And all the while, the story would contain the same wit and humor the series had grown to be known for. Best of all, Fallout 3 would finally enter the third dimension, changing the look of the game forever. But the world would never see any of this come to fruition. Even with the original team of the franchise gone, Interplay still tried to squeeze out more from the franchise, till the very last drop. And that last drop was very lackluster indeed. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, a vast departure from the other Brotherhood of Steel title, looked and played like no game before it, a top-down beat-em-up for consoles. This entry was different in ways that no fan of the series could appreciate. Lazy writing, terrible graphics even for the time, and even worse gameplay mechanics. It was more or less a game with the Fallout logo slapped onto it forcefully with no regard for quality. Just like the sequel that was made without the original team's go-ahead, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was just another Fountain of Dreams. In an ironic twist of fate, Interplay had become their own worst enemy, turning the Fallout franchise into what had become of Wasteland. Jokingly, Interplay actually thought this entry would do well and had a sequel lined up for it. This, of course, never materialized. Now with financial woes along with critical ones, Interplay was in rather dire straits. Titus itself had been in a similar financial situation to Interplay and, after some time, had to close their side of the business in 2004. Now, without anyone over their heads, Interplay continued to fall deeper and deeper into the abyss. The company was evicted from their own workplace and had to work elsewhere. At times, Interplay couldn't even pay their own employees, and many left because of this. After eventually finding a new office, they licensed the rights to create Fallout 3 to a different studio. This one would have years of experience behind their backs to create another masterpiece. Their name? Bethesda Softworks. But this wasn't enough to save them from their own demise. Faced with bankruptcy once again, Interplay was sent to court, and this time, there would be no escape from the inevitable. Like a cornered animal, Interplay would do anything to stay alive, even if that meant selling their baby. Altering their license agreement with Bethesda, the company sold the entire Fallout IP for $5.75 million, saving their own hides from extinction. Fallout was in new hands now, for some for the better, and for others for the worse. Could this new company, with years of experience under its belt and a pedigree for quality fantasy titles, even be able to craft a dark, dystopian future? Or was there just no saving this dying franchise? Only time could tell. Bethesda's involvement in the Fallout franchise began in late 2004. After years of working on their much-beloved Elder Scrolls series, the company was looking for a much-needed change of pace. This opportunity would come out of the blue from the dying Interplay Studios. Without its own creative minds at its own disposal and every attempt of their own ending in failure, Interplay needed a team with a penchant for quality. Bethesda just happened to fit the bill. Starting production in July 2004, Bethesda put a team of just 10 people on the job. As Bethesda had always been in the Elder Scrolls business, their next project, Oblivion, was a top priority, so they could only afford to put so many people into the Fallout project. Led by Bethesda figurehead Todd Howard, the team would try to create a worthy successor to the originals, but with their own flair. Their Fallout 3 would bring back the series' traditional, non-linear gameplay, story, and black comedy. One thing they didn't bring back were the self-referential gags brought about by Fallout 2. While fun and quite hilarious at times, they would often just break the immersion of the depraved world players inhabited, and Bethesda didn't want that in their version of this world. Fallout 3 would also be developed on the Gamebryo engine, the same one used for Oblivion and future Bethesda titles. But the wasteland they created with it would be nothing like its predecessors. In fact, it would be nothing like them entirely. Instead of the charred remains of California, Bethesda would instead turn their eyes towards the east. More specifically, America's capital, Washington, D.C. The Capital Wasteland, as they called it, was a far cry from the developed and thriving New California that was depicted in Fallout 2. Bodies litter the streets, and buildings with artifacts of a bygone era are strewn about, while people still fight for survival, not thrive in it. But the series' iconic cheery 1950s background was left intact. It was, in some aspects, a darker setting than previous entries, but that wasn't the major change that shocked the world. What would shock the world was their choice to leave the trappings of the series' two-dimensional past and enter the third dimension that Bethesda felt home at. This change also brought about another radical innovation in the series. Turn-based combat had always been at the forefront of a Fallout game. This time, it wouldn't be the case. But they wouldn't forget about the franchise's strategic roots. Their idea would transform the system of the past into the VATS system, or Vault Tech Assisted Targeting System. Allowing players to pause time to select individual body parts, VATS, while originally inspired by Burnout's Crash Mode replays, helped bring Fallout into a new medium while keeping to tradition with its bullet time nature. The perspective might have been different, but the team still tried its best to hone in on what made the series great. The special system was still as deep and inventive as when it was first created. Perks were better than ever before. Crazy side quests returned with vampires, undetonated nuclear bombs, and a city populated only by children being one of many. Karma was more important than ever before, with decisions that could affect the wasteland permanently or in slight ways. And character creation was more deep and expansive than ever before. The team behind it was just as dedicated and passionate about the series as their predecessors. Istvan Pelly brought Chris Taylor's cherished original designs into their own world, then made the landscape dense with interesting clutter. Lead designer Emil Paliarulo took to writing duties, returning to classic elements like the vaults, the Gek, the Brotherhood, the Enclave, the Pip-Boy, Vault-Boy companions, and the much-missed dog meat. As a final touch, Bethesda did what Interplay couldn't, licensing the Ink Spot's I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire as their theme song, a track that was intended for the very first Fallout game. These people would not allow Fallout to die. They would try their best to help it prosper, and success would come to them in due time. Just a year after beginning full production on the project, Interplay had been cornered. As Bethesda had been contracted to make the next Fallout game, a lot was riding on the outcome of Interplay's financial situation. But there was more at stake than they thought. To pay off their creditors, Interplay was forced to sell the Fallout IP to Bethesda. All rights to the franchise would be theirs from now on, for better or worse. Interestingly, this happened to coincide with the public unveiling of Bethesda's Fallout 3. After the first trailer was released in June of 2007, 3 years into development, the public was hooked. Hype was being built up for the Fallout franchise for the first time, something it had never seen before. Fallout was back with nearly everything intact. Even Ron Perlman, the iconic iconic voice of the series, returned to provide his fantastic narration. Releasing on October 28th, 2008, Fallout 3 would once again star another Vault Dweller. Unlike previous dwellers and descendants of said dwellers, this time we would see the player grow from birth to his late teenage years. After your father escapes from the vault, you must follow him out into the wasteland, a world much different from your own. Deadly rad scorpions and super mutants around every corner, along with your fellow man, presented a world just as deadly as the ones before it, and characters that were as unique and colorful as the originals populated it all. Whether you were a saint or a devil, it was your world, a world that you could save or blow up into smithereens. The choice, as always, was yours. It was a story that was just as grandiose as its predecessors, and while it faltered at times, it was always still Fallout. Every single inch on the screen oozed with the series' iconic style and creative flair. All of these and more provided to be a major boon for the series, skyrocketing past the franchise's financial woes while keeping its critical expectations. Fallout 3 sold a whopping 4.7 million units across Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the series' standard PC. Winning multiple Game of the Year awards, it was official. Fallout was a phenomenon, one that Interplay could never hope to achieve. People who would have never heard of Fallout before were quickly becoming fans of the series, discovering a hidden gem that had been lost to the ages. But there was one final problem to be solved before they could continue with the franchise, and that was Interplay. In their deal, there was one caveat. Interplay would still be allowed to make a Fallout MMORPG, and have the rights to sell Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics. While the latter was okay in the eyes of Bethesda, the former was not. According to them, Interplay had the right to make an MMO with the name Fallout, nothing less and nothing more, and was supposed to have it done and ready to go by 2008. The storied lore of the franchise was not at their disposal, and they didn't know this. After 2 years in development, Bethesda launched a legal battle against Interplay for the rights to the project. Years of arguing ensued while production had completely stalled on the project. It was even in a near beta stage when the battle ensued, with the previous Fallout developer Jason Anderson at the helm. Interplay was once again in trouble over their creation, and it would not end well for them. 3 years of uphill battles later, Interplay had lost the rights to their next project. While they would be able to continue selling their previous creations for years to come, they would never be able to create another Fallout in any shape or form. Interplay would eventually try to revive this project as V13 through crowdfunding, but a lack of rewards, no access to a proposed forum for contributors to the campaign, no indication of funding goals, and the end product being a prototype, not an actual product, made their final Fallout-like effort a complete and utter failure. Fallout finally seemed to be in the right hands. A company that was still able to keep the spirit and comedic attitude of the series intact while improving and changing it in various ways. We were home once again. Because of Bethesda, Fallout was finally a series that was as iconic and successful as it deserved to be. With Bethesda's help, even the originals were able to have a new spotlight shined on them, and introduce a new generation to the adventures of the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One. They had reached the top. So from here, what direction would they take? Why not bring the original creators back from the brink to create the masterpiece that they had intended to make? But would they let them run free, or would their new overlords destroy it all? To get to the story of the next Fallout iteration, we must first dredge up the past. Back in 2003, a dying Interplay decides to disband Black Isle Studios, the originators of the Fallout series. While many a disgruntled employee stayed with the company or left it behind entirely, a few founding members decided they had enough. The founder of Black Isle, Fergus Urquhart, along with Chris Avallone, Chris Parker, Darren Monahan, and Chris Jones, decided they would found their own studio. Obsidian Entertainment. And they created it out of their own pocket too. Parker, Urquhart, and Monahan invested over $100,000 into their newly founded company. But of course, they needed work to keep the lights on, so they started to work with other publishers, such as Ubisoft and their old rivals, EA. The team even came together to create Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, the follow-up to the critically acclaimed BioWare title to massive success. They truly didn't need Interplay anymore. After years of more critically and commercially successful games such as Neverwinter Nights 2 and Alpha Protocol, Obsidian was on a roll, and some people were taking notice. Those people were the proud new owners of their original creation, Bethesda. Initially, it wasn't even about Fallout. They wanted Obsidian to create a new Star Trek game, but as time went on, the idea lost traction between the two. But after the release of their critically and commercially acclaimed Fallout 3, Bethesda started to change their tune. As they were shifting their focus back to the Elder Scrolls series for the inevitable sequel, they needed someone to keep interest in the franchise going. So, who else better to continue their new legacy than the ones who began it all? The team jumped at the idea of coming back to what made them great, so soon enough, they were off to create a wasteland of their own making. But this wouldn't be without a few exceptions. They wouldn't be given the lax 4-year development cycle Bethesda enjoyed. No, they would only have a year and a half to create it. While Obsidian's previous Fallout 2 had been fraught with many difficulties, bugs, and glitches, the extra year given to them seemed like just enough. But their wasteland was nothing like Bethesda's attempt. In fact, it was more akin to the original 2. It even took place out west. Close, but not too far from where their stories used to be. More importantly, while some new elements were added in, they felt it was high time to use what they had learned from their time with the prototype Van Buren. Some elements were taken in, such as the NCR, Caesar's Legion, and the Hoover Dam, but the crazed mad scientist and some other ideas were scrapped in favor of a new tale that would stand on its own. Their new world would be the Mojave Wasteland, a place that was, in some respects, as decrepit as the Capital Wasteland, and others more advanced. The advanced came with the Strip, a newly reborn Las Vegas with the ever-elusive Mr. House in charge of it all. In the middle was you, the Courier, a man that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. After being shot in the head and left for dead with your mysterious package stolen, it was your job to find the men who killed you and deliver the package you were originally meant to. As usual, you become embroiled in the latest political conflict with the NCR, a nation getting too big for its britches, and the Caesar's Legion, a nation of slavers at the helm. All of this centered around a reformed karma system. Not only did you have to worry about whether a choice was good or evil, but you also had your reputation to contend with. Idolized by the kings in Freeside, they'll throw you some food every now and again. Vilified by the powder gangers, they'll shoot you on sight. Your actions had more consequences than ever before, with hundreds of possible outcomes to happen. Side quests were just as wacky as they were way back in Fallout 2. Running a prostitution ring, assassinating the president, and investigating a secret society run by cannibals are just some of the many side quests the player could go on. There wasn't just one way to complete the quest, there were an innumerable number of ways. The reputation gained and lost throughout each of these, and many more, helped to create one of the most open-ended Fallout games around. Companions were significantly overhauled from the days of Fallout 3. The companion wheel allowed you to easily control your party members' behavior just like you could back in Fallout 2. And each was a living, breathing character with allegiances of their own. The cyber dog Rex needs help finding a new brain. Cass wants to destroy the people who wronged her caravan, Veronica wishes to help the Brotherhood leave their underground shelter, etc., etc. Obsidian had made one of the most diverse sets of followers imaginable, and were just as interesting as the main adventure. Combat was significantly upgraded from Bethesda's innovations in Fallout 3. Guns were actually given true iron sights to aim with, a first for the series, and something that more closely aligned with the series' new first-person roots. On top of this, the weapons could be further modified with scopes, silencers, and a plethora of other options, an innovation from the series' modding community at the time. But above all of these, Obsidian's greatest innovation was hardcore mode. an option that the game explicitly warns you about before even starting the game. Hardcore mode is an optional setting that makes the game more realistic. Unlike the difficulty settings, this added on new gameplay elements such as dehydration and non-instantaneous healing for the player to worry about. To some, it was how Fallout was meant to be played. A truly terrifying wasteland where you could die at any second. The special system also made a return in the same form it was previously in. How you distributed the stats between each of the respective categories created your own personal character. Every single one of them had true purpose, making the choice of which perks to get all the more difficult. Though, this gave you deeper customization for your character. Unlike Fallout 3, you would earn a new one every 2 levels instead of 1, a tactic used by Obsidian to curb the tide of overpowered couriers. But as usual, there was trouble on the home front. The enhanced production time spent on the project took its toll on the company and its creative efforts. More story elements were meant to be added in that would have made this new Fallout even more robust, but as time went on, things had to be cut. One of the most important elements of the game, New Vegas itself, had to be cut down into 3 distinct areas to save on processing power for the consoles, while their original efforts had been on the open-ended PC. This time, they were tied down to the more lucrative console releases. The original New Vegas that they had envisioned in their opening cutscene was sadly chopped to pieces before their very eyes. But they didn't have time to worry about that. They had to release it as quickly as they could to satiate Bethesda's need for a sequel. Fallout 3 was quickly, perhaps too quickly, followed up by Obsidian's effort Fallout New Vegas in late 2010. It seemed like everything was looking up for the team, selling a tad bit under Bethesda's effort at 4 million units. The game was a success financially, but then the complaints started to come in, and they were a blast from the past that Obsidian had hoped to avoid. Bugs and glitches galore were present upon release. Some people weren't even able to play the new game they paid $60 for, and others had constant crashes throughout. For the first time, the extreme bugginess actually hampered the series' critical reception. Coming off from the critically acclaimed Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas received less praise. While it was a more improved game in every right, some critics just couldn't see past the bugs, and this was a blow to Obsidian financially as well. If Fallout New Vegas received an 85+ average rating on Metacritic, the team would earn the royalties they so rightfully earned from the sales. In the end, however, the game only scored an 84. As time went on, the team viewed New Vegas as a learning experience, and after some patches and help from the modding community, the game was eventually in a stable state, for the most part. Fallout New Vegas was the perfect infusion of the old and the new. The unique systems that Bethesda had created for Fallout 3, combined with the wit and humor from the previous games brought about by Obsidian, had created one of the greatest games of all time. You just had to see through all the bugs. But with Obsidian's effort deemed a failure, it was time to call in the cavalry for one more go. But the wasteland they'd make would be radically different from anything else the series has ever created. A decision that could spell disaster. Bethesda's original plans after their massively successful Fallout 3 somewhat faltered in their own execution. While originally planned as a stopgap meant to keep the hype going, Obsidian Entertainment's Fallout New Vegas was quickly deemed a failure in Bethesda's own eyes. While it lasted a few more years with its own swath of expansion packs, the anticipation that the company had maintained was all but dying out. People were hoping, begging for a new Fallout entry that Bethesda wasn't giving them. Rumors and fictitious media sprang up around the web for years and years trying to find that one weak point in Bethesda's armor. Sometimes they were right, and sometimes they were wrong, but by 2015 their prayers had finally been answered. What fans and critics didn't know was that this was Bethesda's plan all along. Back when they had bought the Fallout license in 2007, Bethesda had the clear goal of turning it into their second franchise, right next to their much-beloved Elder Scrolls. And on June 3rd, 2015, Fallout 4 was finally unveiled to the public. While it was a tease to what was to come, it let fans know one thing: Fallout was back. At the following E3, we learned more about the upcoming title along with a project that no one saw coming, and that was Fallout Shelter. Back in 2007, while they were making Fallout 3, the iPhone was just released and the team at Bethesda became hooked on the phone's plethora of titles. After a time, they felt like they should make their own Fallout title for the device, but what could they make? The open-world exploration of the Fallout series couldn't fit inside a tiny handheld, but one idea could: the series' iconic vaults. And so, Fallout Shelter was born. Taking ideas from XCOM, SimCity, and other games like it, you were put in control of your very own vault. Like other classic micromanagement games, you had to keep an eye on your water supply, power, and food. But you also had to bring in wastelanders, have them have children to increase the population, and even send those few unlucky souls out into the wasteland to scavenge for supplies, or die trying. Sometimes, raiders, mole rats, and even deathclaws could attack and destroy your precious vault, looting and killing everything in it. While the game, like many of its kind, had microtransactions, Bethesda tried its very best to keep them at bay and only be used as a minor addition to the game overall, instead of being its sole reason for existence. But before we continue on to Fallout's latest effort, maybe we should check up on an old wasteland. Wasteland, the lost property that had necessitated Fallout's existence. It was sitting in the backlogs of EA. The teams who had created it already moved on to bigger and better things, and with Brian Fargo's Interplay crumbling into pieces, he left to found In Exile Entertainment. This was actually a stroke of luck, as back in 2003, EA did an about-face, claiming Fountain of Dreams was not the true sequel to the iconic Wasteland, making it all the more easy to transfer the IP rights to Brian's new company. And his company was coming on hard times too. After failing to revive their classic Bard's Tale series in 2004, and a string of forgettable titles later, it seemed like Wasteland would go down with its creator. But something in 2012 changed that. After seeing Double Fine's massive success on the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter, it seemed like that would be their last shot. Starting their own campaign in March of 2012, it became a monumental success, passing its $900,000 goal in less than 2 days, and skyrocketing past that for them to afford Obsidian's Chris Avellone, who'd worked on Fallout 2 and New Vegas. It was clear what people wanted. Ending in April with nearly $3 million in funding, Wasteland 2 made it clear that there was a hunger for 1990-style RPGs in an industry where big-budgeted BioWare and Bethesda-style RPGs had largely replaced those. While it suffered some delays, Wasteland 2 was eventually released in September 2014 to critical acclaim, a combination of Wasteland and the first two Fallout games with its isometric perspective and post-apocalyptic visual design. Wasteland 2 was a return to form and an ode to the original Fallout games that might as well have been a side story. It was a happy time to be a fan of the story that started it all and the way it was played today. Bethesda knew and understood and set out to create something to appeal to this very notion, and that would be Fallout 4. Beginning development just after The Elder Scrolls Skyrim, this new entry would be a different beast entirely. Interestingly enough, this time instead of starting out as a classic vault dweller, courier, or tribal savage, players would assume the role of someone from before the Great War that plunged the world into nuclear Armageddon. This Boston native would have a nuclear family of their own, with a spouse, baby boy, and robot butler to boot. It was a quiet suburban life, until the day Vault Tech came a-knockin'. After being selected to be in one of the new vaults, the emergency sirens flare. Your family runs to the vault and makes it in, miraculously, just as the bombs drop, only to be cryogenically frozen for 200 years. Waking up as the sole survivor of the vault with your partner dead and your baby missing, it's time to open your eyes to the new world of the Commonwealth and find your son, wherever he may be. But the Commonwealth would be a lot different from, say, the Capital Wasteland. There were 4 different factions vying for control this time. The Minutemen want to protect the common person. The Railroad wants to save synths, synthetic humanoids created by the Institute that hides beneath the Earth. That Institute being another faction altogether, and then there's the classic Brotherhood of Steel. While the search for your son gets lost from time to time, playing around with each faction's ideology was essential to the story. It seemed like an interesting take on a classic tale, but there were several changes that hindered it for better or worse. For one, karma. The series' ever-present determination of whether you're a decent human being or an evil one was removed entirely. You could play the part of the dastardly villain or the chivalrous knight and everything in between, but either way, the world really didn't care. Dialogue was cut down too. In the past, you would be able to know exactly what you were going to say and when, but now, those were replaced with easy-to-understand words such as the ever-famous sarcasm. However, the biggest change that altered the very foundation of the series was that of the voiced protagonist. While Fallout had been known for its wide variety of famous voices, the character you play as has never been voiced. Brian Delaney and Courtney Taylor tried their various bests to brave this new frontier for Bethesda games as a whole, and while some say they exceeded immensely, others feel that some of the magic had been lost. But more features were added in that could be said to make up for the losses. Fallout 4's companions made for some of the most diverse and compelling ones yet. The trepid reporter Piper, the film noir detective Nick Valentine, the kid that grew up McCready, and the companion that could now be considered Fallout's other mascot, Dogmeat. These, along with many more, helped to make your adventure all the more interesting. While karma was gone for good, it was replaced with a system that made your companions seem all the more realistic. Each had their own individual likes and dislikes to your actions in the game world and would judge you accordingly. If you worked at it and gained enough affinity with them, you might have become more romantically involved. It was a more individualized karma system, and if you wanted to keep a companion, you had to act accordingly. They were their own people, and just happened to be along for the wild ride you were taking them on. Out of all of the improvements Bethesda had made, gunplay was certainly the biggest. It had a sort of newfound fluidity to it, whereas Fallout 3's weaponry was a little bit stiff when it came to shooting. Fallout 4 was in another league. Gameplay, and especially combat, was much smoother, with guns and melee weapons having a real impact on the battlefield. VATS also experienced a significant change. While the system used to pause time completely, now the world was just seen in slow motion. The idea had crossed Bethesda's mind before, although they weren't able to implement it until the gunplay could stand beside it. You still had time to pick your shots, but now it had a sense of urgency to it. On top of the weaponry, it was all fully customizable. Out of the 50 base weapons, you could create an innumerable amount of customizations and make yourself the gun that you truly want to use. Weapon crafting had never seen as many options as it did that day, but that wasn't the only thing you could create. A whole settlement building system was built into the game, letting the player create the towns and villages that Bethesda had been making before them. Anyone could craft anything within reason in the Fallout universe, from a small farming community to an impenetrable fortress. You even had to take care of the individual villagers, assigning them jobs and tasks to keep them busy. It was something Fallout had never seen before, but seemed to fit in well with the rest of the gameplay. But there was one major problem: that ever-so-classic special system. While in the past you had your 7 specials along with a whole swath of skills and perks, this time Bethesda decided to mold them into one complete system. You still, of course, had to choose your individual specials, but after that point, everything changed. Each and every level, the player earned 1 point that they could put into a perk or a special category. You could boost your charisma or level up your commando perk. And that's the thing. Skills were basically non-existent, and now had fused with perks to create their own unique hybrid. They were no longer as special as they used to be. On top of this, you could level up as far as you wanted to. There was no stopping you from becoming so overpowered that you were nigh unstoppable, where even the highest difficulty level holds no challenge. It was again a toss-up between streamlining and dumbing down the Fallout series. And fans were not pleased. This new Fallout still felt like the others. It had its own share of colorful characters and quests while creating a more interesting looking world than the series had ever seen, but there was something missing from it for some people. The magic of the franchise had been twisted and contorted by these new additions. Bethesda was looking to appeal to a more mainstream audience. A talking protagonist made things easier to understand, but left a hole that the player had always filled. The dialogue had been radically changed, but still had that Fallout edge to it, and the new leveling system had made it possible for someone to truly become the king of the wastes, something that was never the franchise's intention. But make no mistake, it was still Fallout. It was only because of Bethesda that it had had changed so much to their liking. And people still loved it too. After selling over 12 million units, Fallout 4 is one of the best-selling Bethesda games of all time. With 2 unique and fully sized areas to explore, a plethora of contraptions and gizmos for crafting, and a thriving modding community to support it, the journey through the Commonwealth is far from over. Only time will tell if it surpasses the Elder Scrolls, but while it succeeded financially, ironically, it barely made it critically. The series' critical reputation was lost to this entry, a sign of things to come, or merely a bump in the road. Who's to say where the franchise will head towards now? Fallout has an interesting tale. What began as a backup to a stolen property became an even more successful venture. Its first 2 entries rarely succeeded financially, but always achieved critically, and in the eyes of their devoted fans. Even as the franchise dwindled in popularity and quality, people still clung to it as they felt something special somewhere deep inside. More companies eventually attempted to replicate the magic with varying accomplishments, but they still were able to keep the feel alive for years to come. But that's the thing about Fallout. It's not only defined by its intriguing setting, characters, and gameplay, but also by its dark comedy and masterful storytelling. Few can compare to it, fewer can replicate it, and only a handful can create it. But that's the thing about the Wasteland. While it can be harsh and abrasive at times, it can also offer the opportunity of rebuilding, of redemption. And who's to say that's not the story of Fallout in a nutshell?